All right, the grow more hands. That's great. Okay. Well, restarted. The scary text is gone, so I think we'll be all right. And I will do more research on the multi-streaming and find out what the heck I'm doing wrong. Um, are you calling my laugh a stutter? Oh no, I bet because of the delay, it cut off some of the audio when I ended the stream. That would make sense. Okay. Sorry about that. Well, getting the dropped frames message again. I don't know. Maybe it's an ISP thing. I hope not. But yeah, okay. Well, we will just bear with it, and yeah. So I was kind of at a loss for. Hey, Biscuit Boy, glad you could make it. How are you? I was kind of at a loss for what to do. I was torn between trying to find something a little more obscure or going with a Sherlock Holmes. Yes, I restarted without the YouTube in case that was the cause. I wanted to figure that out. Honestly, I kind of figured there was probably nobody looking at the YouTube yet since I didn't actually do any promotion for that. But yeah, I'm getting fewer dropped frames, but still getting dropped frames. And I appreciate it a lot. I will have to contact my ISP and say what the heck. But not now. As I was saying, I was kind of torn between doing like a Sherlock Holmes or maybe one of the more obscure detective stories from the era. But honestly, I liked. You'll be sure who's back soon? I really liked Hercule Poirot, and I admit I liked him a lot more after those last couple of pages where he kind of like revealed. Um, oh yeah, I'm here. I've been here. He kind of revealed what a softy and a romantic he was, and that really got to me. So I wanted to see what he looks like with a little more character development in another novel. Hey, Biscuit Boy, thank you so much for the follow. It's it's awesome. All right, so I figured we'd take another run with Hercule Poirot, see what we think of him, and then maybe we'll try a Sherlock Holmes or another novel for comparison after that. But we are going to read The Murder on the Links by Agatha Christie. Good, I'm glad. I suppose I should get to it then, huh? Uh, do join the Discord. We generally chat a little bit after each reading. There's a spot that could use a little more use for discussing the novels we read, places to request additional novels, and that sort of thing. The links are in the Twitch page, and if I know Vela, I bet it's about to pop up in the chat as well. Book boy. All right. Well, chapter 1. Hey, little dude, glad you could make it. A fellow traveler. I believe that a well-known anecdote exists to the effect that a young writer, determined to make the commencement of his story forcible and original enough to catch and rivet the attention of the most blasé of editors, penned the following sentence. "Hell," said the Duchess. Strangely enough, this tale of mine opens in much the same fashion. Only the lady who gave utterance to the exclamation was not a duchess. It was a day in early June. I had been transacting some business in Paris, and was returning by the morning service to London, where I was still sharing rooms with my old friend, the Belgian ex-detective Hercule Poirot. The Calais Express was singularly empty. In fact, my own compartment held only one other traveler. I had made a somewhat hurried departure from the hotel, and was busy assuring myself that I had duly collected all my traps when the train started. Up till then, I had hardly noticed my companion, but I was now violently recalled to the fact of her existence. Jumping up from her seat, she let down the window and stuck her head out, withdrawing it a moment later with the brief, enforceable ejaculation, "Hell!" Hey, story time, glad you could make it. Now, I am old-fashioned. A woman, I consider, should be womanly. I have no patience with the modern neurotic girl who jazzes from morning to night, smokes like a chimney, and uses language which would make a Billingsgate fishwoman blush. I looked up now, frowning slightly, into a pretty, impudent face, surmounted by a rakish little red hat. A thick cluster of black curls hid each ear. I judged that she was little more than 17, but her face was covered with powder, and her lips were quite impossibly scarlet. I mean, clearly the narrator has poor taste in women. Except for the smoking part, But that's not just women, that's everyone. Then again, I'm slightly biased against smoking. My grandmother passed from cancer, and I can't help but link that to a lifetime of smoking. And I miss her terribly, so, yeah. Does make me a bit anti-smoking. Nothing abashed, she returned my glance and executed an expressive grimace. "Dear me, we've shocked the kind gentleman," she observed to an imaginary audience. "I apologize for my language. Most unladylike, and all that, but oh Lord, there's reason enough for it. Do you know, I've lost my only sister." "Really," I said politely. "How unfortunate." "He disapproves," remarked the lady. "He disapproves utterly of me and my sister, which last is unfair because he hasn't seen her." I opened my mouth, but she forestalled me. "Say no more. Nobody loves me. I shall go into the garden and eat worms. Boo-hoo, I am crushed." Clearly this woman put on her sassy pants, as Vela likes to say. I think she's pretty entertaining. And thank you, Biscuit Boy. Yeah, she the cancer metastasized and it spread literally everywhere. So I did at least get to say goodbye. But that is another story. Maybe I'll tell it during the intermission a little bit. She buried herself behind a large comic French paper. In a minute or two, I saw her eyes stealthily peeping at me over the top. In spite of myself, I could not help smiling. and in a minute she had tossed the paper aside and had burst into a merry peal of laughter. "I knew you weren't such a mutt as you looked," she cried. Her laughter was so infectious that I could not help joining in, though I hardly cared for the word mutt. The girl was certainly all that I most disliked, but that was no reason why I should make myself ridiculous by my attitude. I prepared to unbend. After all, she was decidedly pretty. Oh, yes. The one thing that forgives all sins from in these books. If the girl's pretty, it's okay. "There. Now we're friends," declared the minx. "Say you're sorry about my sister." "I am desolated." "That's a good boy." "Let me finish. I was going to add that, although I am desolated, I can manage to put up with her absence very well." I made a little bow. But this most unaccountable of damsels frowned and shook her head. "Cut it out. I prefer the dignified disapproval stunt." "Oh, your face. Not one of us," it said. And you were right there. Though, mind you, it's pretty hard to tell nowadays. It's not everyone who can distinguish between a Demi and a Duchess. "There now, I believe I've shocked you again. You've been dug out of the backwoods, you have. Not that I mind that. We could do with a few more of your sort. I just hate a fellow who gets fresh. It makes me mad." She shook her head vigorously. "What do you like when you're mad?" I inquired with a smile. "A regular little devil. Don't care what I say, or what I do, either. I nearly did a chap in once. Yes, really. He'd have deserved it, too. Italian blood I've got. I shall get into trouble one of these days." "Well," I begged, "don't get mad with me." "I shan't. I like you, did the first moment I set eyes on you, but you looked so disapproving that I never thought we should make friends." "Well, we have. Tell me something about yourself." "I'm an actress. No, not the kind you're thinking of, lunching at the Savoy, covered with jewelry, and with their photograph in every paper, saying how much they love Madame So-and-so's face cream. I've been on the board since I was a kid of 6, tumbling." "I beg your pardon," I said, puzzled. "Haven't you seen Child Acrobats?" "Oh, I understand." "I am American-born, but I've spent most of my life in England. We got a new show now." "We?" "My sister and I. Sort of song and dance, and a bit of patter, and a dash of the old business thrown in. It's quite a new idea, and it hits them every time. There's to be money in it." My new acquaintance leaned forward and discoursed volubly, a great many of her terms being quite unintelligible to me. Yet I found myself evincing an increasing interest in her. She seemed such a curious mixture of child and woman, though perfectly worldly wise, and able, as she expressed it, to take care of herself. There was yet something curiously ingenuous in her single-minded attitude toward life, and her whole-hearted determination to make good. This glimpse of a world unknown to me was not without its charm, and I enjoyed seeing her vivid little face light up as she talked. We passed through Amin. The name awakened many memories. My companion seemed to have an intuitive knowledge of what was in my mind. "Thinking of the war?" I nodded. "You were through it, I suppose?" "Pretty well. I was wounded once, and after the Somme they invalided me out altogether. I had a half-fledged army job for a bit. I'm sort of a private secretary now to an MP. My, that's brainy. No, it isn't. There's really awfully little to do. Usually a couple of hours every day sees me through. It's dull work, too. In fact, I don't know what I should do if I hadn't got something to fall back upon. Don't say you collect bugs. No. I share rooms with a very interesting man. He's a Belgian, an ex-detective. He's set up as a private detective in London, and he's doing extraordinarily well. He's really a marvelous little man. Time and again he has proved to be right where the official police have failed. My companion listened with widening eyes. Isn't that interesting now? I just adore crime. I'll go to all the mysteries on the movies. And when there's a murder on, I just devour the papers. Do you remember the Styles case? I asked. Let me see. Was that the old lady who was poisoned? Somewhere down in Essex. I nodded. That was Perot's first big case. Undoubtedly, but for him, the murderer would have escaped scot-free. It was a most wonderful bit of detective work. Warming to my subject, I ran over the heads of the affair, working up to the triumphant and unexpected denouement. The girl listened spellbound. In fact, we were so absorbed that the train drew into the Calais station before we realized it. My goodness gracious me, cried my companion. Where's my powder puff? She proceeded to bedaub her face liberally, and then applied a stick of lip salve to her lips, observing the effect in a small pocket glass, and betraying not the faintest sign of self-consciousness. I say, I hesitated. I dare say it's cheek on my part, but why do all that sort of thing? The girl paused in her operations and stared at me with undisguised surprise. It isn't as though you weren't so pretty that you could afford to do without it, I said stammeringly. My dear boy, I've got to do it. All the girls do. Think I want to look like a little frump up from the country? She took one last look in the mirror, smiled approval, and put it in her vanity box away in her bag. That's better. Keeping up appearances is a bit of a fag, I grant, but if a girl respects herself, it's up to her not to let herself get slack. We definitely need to have more of the scones, crumpets, muffin debate. To this essentially moral sentiment, I had no reply. A point of view makes a great difference. I secured a couple of porters, and we alighted on the platform. My companion held out her hand. Goodbye, and I'll mind my language better in future. Oh, but surely you'll let me look after you on the boat. Mayn't be on the boat. I've got to see whether that sister of mine got aboard after all anywhere. But thanks all the same. Oh, but we're going to meet again, surely. I hesitated. I want to meet your sister. We both laughed. That's real nice of you. I'll tell her what you say. But I don't fancy we'll meet again. You've been very good to me on the journey, especially after I cheeked you as I did. But what your face expressed first thing is quite true. I'm not your kind. And that brings trouble. I know that well enough. Her face changed. For the moment, all the light-hearted gaiety died out of it. It looked angry, revengeful. So goodbye, she finished in a lighter tone. I suppose you preferring biscuits definitely makes sense, Biscuit Boy. I gotta say, though, a fresh baked buttered scone is a thing of wonder and beauty. So goodbye, she finished in a lighter tone. Aren't you even going to tell me your name? I cried as she turned away. She looked over her shoulder. A dimple appeared in each cheek. She was like a lovely picture by Greuze. Cinderella, she said, and laughed. But little did I think when and how I should see Cinderella again. You actually memorized that, Vella? That's from one of the other books that we're reading. It's a company that I suspect was created to defraud its investors. And a novel by Charles Dickens. We read it on Saturdays. Well, I was going to give you credit. Chapter 2. An Appeal for Help. It was 5 minutes past 9 when I entered our joint sitting room for breakfast on the following morning. My friend Perot, exact to the minute as usual, was just tapping the shell of his second egg. He beamed upon me as I entered. You have slept well, yes? You have recovered from the crossing so terrible? It is a marvel. Almost you are exact this morning. Pardon, but your tie is not symmetrical. Permit that I rearrange him. Elsewhere I have described Hercule Poirot, an extraordinary little man. Height, 5 feet 4 inches. Egg-shaped head carried a little to one side. Eyes that shone green when he was excited. Stiff military moustache. Air of dignity immense. He was neat and dandified in appearance. For neatness of any kind, he had an absolute passion. To see an ornament set crooked, or a speck of dust, or a slight disarray in one's attire, was torture to the little man until he could ease his feelings by remedying the matter. Order and method were his gods. He had a certain disdain for tangible evidence, such as footprints and cigarette ash, and would maintain that, taken by themselves, they would never enable a detective to solve a problem. Then he would tap his egg-shaped head with absurd complacency, and remark with great satisfaction, "The true work, it is done from within. The little gray cells. Remember always the little gray cells, mon ami." I slipped into my seat and remarked idly, in answer to Perrault's greeting, that an hour's sea passage from Calais to Dover could hardly be dignified by the epithet terrible. Perrault waved his egg spoon in vigorous refutation of my remark. "Du toi, if for an hour one experiences sensations and emotions of the most terrible, one has lived many hours. Does not one of your English poets say that time is counted, not by hours, but by heartbeats?" I fancy Browning was referring to something more romantic than seasickness, though. Because he was an Englishman, an islander to whom La Manche was nothing. Oh, you English! With nous autres it is different. Figure to yourself that a lady of my acquaintance at the beginning of the war fled to Ostend. There she had a terrible crisis of the nerves. Impossible to escape further except by crossing the sea. And she had a horror. Un horreur of the sea. What was she to do? Daily les Boches were drawing near. Imagine to yourself the terrible situation. What did she do? I inquired curiously. Fortunately, her husband was homme pratique. He was also very calm. The crises of the nerves, they affected him not. Il importait simplement. Naturally, when she reached England, she was prostrate, but she still breathed. Perrault shook his head seriously. I composed my face as best I could. Suddenly, he stiffened and pointed a dramatic finger at the toast rack. "Ah, par exemple, c'est trop fort," he cried. "What is it?" "This piece of toast. You remark him not?" He whipped the offender out of the rack and held it up for me to examine. "Is it square?" "No." "Is it a triangle?" Again, no. "Is it even round?" "No." "Is it of any shape remotely pleasing to the eye? What symmetry have we here?" "None." "It's cut from a cottage loaf," I explained soothingly. Perrault threw me a withering glance. "What an intelligence has my friend Hastings!" he exclaimed sarcastically. "Comprehend you not that I have forbidden such a loaf haphazard and shapeless, that no baker should permit himself to bake?" I endeavored to distract his mind. "Anything interesting come by the post?" It would be kind of cool if they bumped into each other. I'm not sure if they were really doing crossovers back then. I mean, you could certainly meet a pastiche of Sherlock, though. Perrault shook his head with a dissatisfied air. "I've not yet examined my letters, but nothing of interest arrives nowadays. The great criminals, the criminals of method, they do not exist. The cases I have been employed upon lately were banal to the last degree. In verity, I am reduced to recovering lost lapdogs for fashionable ladies. The last problem that presented any interest was that intricate little affair of the Yardley diamond, and that was how many months ago, my friend?" He shook his head despondently, and I roared with laughter. "Cheer up, Perrault. The luck will change. Open your letters. For all you know, there may be a great case looming on the horizon. Wow. Apparently you got auto-moderated there, Sonny. It seems to think that abhorring something is quite sexual. Not sure I agree with Twitch's little personal quirks there. Barreau smiled, and taking up the neat little letter opener with which he opened his correspondence, he slit the tops of several envelopes that lay by his plate. A bill. Another bill. It is that I grow extravagant in my old age. He gets the same kind of mail I do. Aha! A note from Jop. Yes? Pricked up my ears. The Scotland Yard inspector had more than once introduced us to an interesting case. He merely thanks me, in his fashion, for a little point in the Aberystwyth case on which I was able to set him right. I am delighted to have been of service to him. How does he thank you? I asked curiously, for I knew my Jop. He is kind enough to say that I am a wonderful sport for my age, and that he was glad to have had the chance of letting me in on the case. This was so typical of Jop that I could not forbear a chuckle. Barreau continued to read his correspondence placidly. A suggestion that I should give a lecture to our local Boy Scouts. The Countess of Forfanock will be obliged if I will call and see her. Another lapdog, without doubt. And now for the last. Ah. I looked up, quick to notice the change of tone. Barreau was reading attentively. In a minute, he tossed the sheet over to me. This is out of the ordinary, mon ami. Read for yourself. The letter was written on a foreign type of paper, in a bold, characteristic hand. Via Genevieve, Merlinville-sur-Mer, France. Dear Sir, I am in need of the services of a detective, and for reasons which I will give you later, do not wish to call in the official police. I have heard of you from several quarters, and all reports go to show that you are not only a man of decided ability, but one who also knows how to be discreet. I do not wish to trust details to the post, but on account of a secret I possess, I go in daily fear of my life. I am convinced that the danger is imminent, and therefore I beg that you will lose no time in crossing to France. I will send a car to meet you at Calais, if you will wire me when you are arriving. I shall be obliged if you will drop all cases you have on hand and devote yourself solely to my interests. I am prepared to pay any compensation necessary. I shall probably need your services for a considerable period of time, as it may be necessary for you to go out to Santiago, where I spent several years of my life. I shall be content for you to name your own fee, assuring you once more that the matter is urgent. Yours faithfully, P.T. Renaud. Below the signature was a hastily scrawled line, almost illegible. For God's sake, come. I handed the letter back with quickened pulses. At last, I said, here is something distinctly out of the ordinary. Yes, indeed, said Barreau meditatively. You will go, of course, I continued. Barreau nodded. He was thinking deeply. Finally, he seemed to make up his mind, and glanced up at the clock. His face was very grave. See you, my friend. There is no time to lose. The Continental Express leaves Victoria at 11 o'clock. Do not agitate yourself. There is plenty of time. We can allow 10 minutes for discussion. You accompany me, n'est-ce pas? Well, you told me yourself that your employer needed you not for the next few weeks. Oh, that's all right. But this Mr. Renoir hints strongly that his business is private. Ta. I will manage Mr. Renoir. By the way, I seem to know the name. There's a well-known South American millionaire fellow. His name's Renoir, but I don't know whether this could be the same. But without doubt, That explains the mention of Santiago. Santiago is in Chile, and Chile is in South America. Ah, but we progress finely. Dear me, Perrault, I said, my excitement rising. I smell some goodly shekels in this. If we succeed, we shall make our fortunes. Do not be too sure of that, my friend. A rich man and his money are not so easily parted. Me, I have seen a well-known millionaire turn out a tram full of people to seek for a dropped halfpenny. I acknowledge the wisdom of this. In any case, continued Perrault, it is not the money which attracts me here. Certainly it would be pleasant to have carte blanche in our investigations. One can be sure that way of wasting no time. But it is something a little bizarre in this problem which arouses my interest. You remarked the postscript? How did it strike you? I considered. Clearly he wrote the letter keeping himself well in hand, but at the end his self-control snapped, and on the impulse of the moment he scrawled those 4 desperate words. But my friend shook his head energetically. You are in error. See you not that while the ink of the signature is nearly black, that of the postscript is quite pale? Well, I said, puzzled. Mon Dieu, mon ami, but use your little gray cells. Is it not obvious? Mr. Renoir wrote his letter. Without blotting it, he reread it carefully. Then, not on impulse, but deliberately, he added those last words and blotted the sheet. But why? Parbleu, so that it should produce the effect upon me that it has upon you. What? My oui, to make sure of my coming. He read the letter and was dissatisfied. It was not strong enough. He paused and then added softly, his eyes shining with that green light that always betokened inward excitement. And so, mon ami, since that postscript was added, not on impulse, but soberly, in cold blood, the urgency is very great, and we must reach him as soon as possible. Merlinville, I murmured thoughtfully. I've heard of it, I think. Perrault nodded. It is a quiet little place, but chic. It lies about midway between Boulogne and Calais. It is rapidly becoming the fashion. Rich English people who wish to be quiet are taking it up. Mr. Renaud has a house in England, I suppose. Yes, in Rutland Gate, as far as I remember. Also a big place in the country, somewhere in Hertfordshire. But I really know very little about him. He doesn't do much in a social way. I believe he has large South American interests in the city, and has spent most of his life out in Chile and the Argentino. Well, we shall hear all details from the man himself. Come, let us pack. A small suitcase each, and then a taxi to Victoria. And the Countess? I inquired with a smile. Ah, je m'en fiche. Her case was certainly not interesting. Why so sure of that? Because in that case she would have come, not written. A woman cannot wait. Always remember that, Hastings. What do you think, Chad? Is that true? 11 o'clock saw our departure from Victoria on our way to Dover. Before starting, Perrault had dispatched a telegram to Mr. Renaud, giving the time of our arrival in Calais. I'm surprised you haven't invested in a few bottles of some seasick remedy, Perrault, I observed maliciously, as I recalled our conversation at breakfast. My friend, who was anxiously scanning the weather, turned a reproachful face upon me. Is it that you have forgotten the method most excellent of Lavagier? His system, I practice it always. One balances oneself, if you remember, turning the head from left to right, breathing in and out, counting 6 between each breath. Wonder if that actually works. My first time out on the ocean in a ship, I was caught in a big storm, and I ended up spending most of the storm centerline amidships, with my head tucked between my knees, utterly and completely miserable. I was violently seasick. I demurred. You'll be rather tired of balancing yourself and counting 6 by the time you get to Santiago, or Buenos Aires, or wherever it is you land. Que idea! You do not figure to yourself that I shall go to Santiago. Mr. Renaud suggested in his letter. He did not know the methods of Hercule Poirot. I do not run to and fro, making journeys and agitating myself. My work is done from within. Here. He tapped his forehead significantly. As usual, this remark roused my argumentative faculty. It's all very well, Poirot, but I think you are falling into the habit of despising certain things too much. A fingerprint has led sometimes to the arrest and conviction of a murderer. And has, without doubt, hanged more than one innocent man, remarked Poirot dryly. But surely the study of fingerprints and footprints, cigarette ash, different kinds of mud, and other clues that comprise the minute observation of details, all these are of vital importance. Oh, have a good day, Sonny. Thank you for stopping in while you did. Always glad to have you here. But certainly, I have never said otherwise. The trained observer, the expert, without doubt, he is useful. But the others, the Hercule Poirots, they are above the experts. To them, the experts bring the facts. Their business is the method of the crime, its logical deduction, the proper sequence and order of the facts. Above all, the true psychology of the case. You have hunted the fox, yes? I have hunted a bit, now and again, I said, rather bewildered by this abrupt change of subject. Why? Eh bien, this hunting of the fox. You need the dogs, no? Hounds, I corrected gently. Yes, of course. But yet, Poirot wagged his finger at me, you did not descend from your horse and run along the ground, smelling with your nose and uttering loud ow-ows. In spite of myself, I laughed immoderately. Poirot nodded in a satisfied manner. So, you leave the work of the hounds to the hounds. Yet you should demand that I, Hercule Poirot, should make myself ridiculous by lying down, possibly on damp grass, to study hypothetical footprints, and should scoop up cigarette ash when I do not know one kind from the other. Remember the Plymouth Express mystery. The good Jop departed to make a survey of the railway line. When he returned, I, without having moved from my apartments, was able to tell him exactly what he had found. So you are of the opinion that Jop wasted his time? Not at all, since his evidence confirmed my theory. But I should have wasted my time if I had gone. It is the same with so-called experts. Remember the handwriting testimony in the Cavendish case. One counsel's questioning brings out testimony as to resemblances. The defense brings evidence to show dissimilarity. All the language is very technical. And the result? What we all knew in the first place. The writing was very like that of John Cavendish. And the psychological mind is faced with the question, why? Because it was actually his? Or because someone wished us to think it was his? I answered that question, mon ami, and answered it correctly. And Poirot, having effectually silenced, if not convinced me, leaned back with a satisfied air. On the boat, I knew better than to disturb my friend's solitude. The weather was gorgeous, and the sea as smooth as the proverbial mill pond, so I was hardly surprised to hear that Levergueur's method had once more justified itself, when a smiling Poirot joined me on disembarking at Calais. A disappointment was in store for us, as no car had been sent to meet us, but Poirot put this down to his telegram having been delayed in transit. Since it is carte blanche, we will hire a car, he said cheerfully. And a few minutes later saw us creaking and jolting along, in the most ramshackle of automobiles that ever plied for hire, in the direction of Merlinville. My spirits were at their highest. What gorgeous air, I exclaimed. This promises to be a delightful trip. For you, yes. For me, I have work to do, remember, at our journey's end. Bah, I said cheerfully. You will discover all, Ensure this Mr. Renoir's safety. Run the would-be assassins to earth, and all will finish in a blaze of glory. You're sanguine, my friend. Yes, I feel absolutely assured of success. Are you not the one and only Hercule Poirot? But my little friend did not rise to the bait. He was observing me gravely. You are what the Scotch people call fey, Hastings. It presages disaster. Nonsense. At any rate, you do not share my feelings. No, but I am afraid. Afraid of what? I do not know. But I have a premonition. A je ne sais quoi. He spoke so gravely that I was impressed in spite of myself. I have a feeling, he said slowly, that this is going to be a big affair. A long, troublesome problem that will not be easy to work out. I would have questioned him further, but we were just coming into the little town of Merlinville, and we slowed up to inquire the way to Villa Genevieve. Straight on, monsieur, through the town. The Villa Genevieve is about half a mile the other side. You cannot miss it. A big villa overlooking the sea. We thanked our informant and drove on, leaving the town behind. A fork in the road brought us to a second halt. A peasant was trudging toward us, and we waited for him to come up to us in order to ask the way again. There was a tiny villa standing right by the road, but it was too small and dilapidated to be the one we wanted. As we waited, the gate of it swung open, and a girl came out. The peasant was passing us now, and the driver leaned forward from his seat and asked for direction. The Villa Genevieve? Just a few steps up this road to the right, monsieur. You could see it if it were not for the curve. The chauffeur thanked him and started the car again. My eyes were fascinated by the girl who stood, with one hand on the gate, watching us. I am an admirer of beauty, and here was one whom nobody could have passed without remark. Very tall, with the proportions of a young goddess, her uncovered golden head gleaming in the sunlight. I swore to myself that she was one of the most beautiful girls I had ever seen. As we swung up the rough road, I turned my head to look after her. By Jove, Poirot, I exclaimed, did you see that young goddess? Poirot raised his eyebrows. Car commence, he murmured. Already you have seen a goddess? But, hang it all, wasn't she? Possibly. I did not remark the fact. Surely you noticed her. Mon ami, two people rarely see the same thing. You, for instance, saw a goddess. He hesitated. Yes? I saw only a girl with anxious eyes. But at that moment, we drew up to a big green gate, and simultaneously we both uttered an exclamation. Before it stood an imposing sergeant de ville. He held up his hand to bar our way. You cannot pass, messieurs. But we wish to see Mr. Renoir, I cried. We have an appointment. This is his villa, isn't it? Yes, monsieur, but... Poirot leaned forward. But what? Mr. Renoir was murdered this morning. Hastings? Eyeing the girls? No, that never happens. At the Villa Genevieve. It's chapter 3. In a moment, Poirot had leapt from the car, his eyes blazing with excitement. He caught the man by the shoulder. What is that you say? Murdered? When? How? The sergeant de ville drew himself up. I cannot answer any questions, monsieur. True, I comprehend. Poirot reflected for a minute. The commissary of police. He is without doubt within. Yes, monsieur. Poirot took out a card and scribbled a few words on it. Voila. Will you have the goodness to see that this card is sent into the commissary at once? The man took it and, turning his head over his shoulder, whistled. In a few seconds, a comrade joined him and was handed Poirot's message. There was a wait of some minutes, and then a short, stout man with a huge moustache came bustling down to the gate. The sergeant de ville saluted and stood aside. My dear Monsieur Poirot, cried the newcomer, I am delighted to see you. Your arrival is most opportune. Poirot's face had lightened up. Monsieur Bex, This is indeed a pleasure. He turned to me. This is an English friend of mine, Captain Hastings, Monsieur Lucien Bex. The commissary and I bowed to each other ceremoniously. Then Monsieur Bex turned once more to Perrault. Mon vieux, I have not seen you since 1909, that time in Ostend. I heard that you had left the force. So I have. I wrote a private business in London. And you say you have information to give which may assist us? Possibly you know it already. You are aware that I had been sent for? No. By whom? The dead man. It seems he knew an attempt was going to be made on his life. Unfortunately, he sent for me too late. Sacré tonnerre, ejaculated the Frenchman. So he foresaw his own murder. That upsets our theories considerably. But come inside. He held the gate open, and we commenced walking toward the house. Monsieur Bex continued to talk. The examining magistrate, Monsieur Hotet, must hear of this at once. He has just finished examining the scene of the crime, and is about to begin his interrogations. A charming man. You will like him. Most sympathetic. Original in his methods, but an excellent judge. When was the crime committed? Asked Perrault. The body was discovered this morning, about 9 o'clock. Madame Renaud's evidence and that of the doctors goes to show that the death must have occurred about 2 in the morning. But enter, I pray of you. We had arrived at the steps which led up to the front door of the villa. In the hall, another sergeant de ville was sitting. He rose at the sight of the commissary. Where is Monsieur Hotet now? Inquired the latter. In the salon, monsieur. Monsieur Bex opened a door to the left of the hall, and we passed in. Monsieur Hotet and his clerk were sitting at a big round table. They looked up as we entered. The commissary introduced us and explained our presence. Mr. Hotet, the juge d'instruction, was a tall, gaunt man, with piercing dark eyes, and a neatly cut gray beard, which he had a habit of caressing as he talked. Standing by the mantelpiece was an elderly man, with slightly stooping shoulders, who was introduced to us as Dr. Durand. Most extraordinary, remarked Monsieur Hotet as the commissary finished speaking. You have the letter here, monsieur? Perrault handed it to him, and the magistrate read it. He speaks of his secret. What a pity he was not more explicit. We are much indebted to you, Monsieur Perrault. I hope you will do us the honor of assisting us in our investigations. Or are you obliged to return to London? Monsieur le Juge, I propose to remain. I did not arrive in time to prevent my client's death, but I feel myself bound in honor to discover the assassin. The magistrate bowed. These sentiments do you honor. Also, without doubt, Madame Renoir will wish to retain your services. We are expecting Monsieur Gerard from the Sûreté in Paris any moment, and I am sure that you and he will be able to give each other mutual assistance in your investigations. In the meantime, I hope that you will do me the honor to be present at my interrogations, and I need hardly say that if there is any assistance you require, it is at your disposal. I thank you, monsieur. You will comprehend at present that I am completely in the dark. I know nothing whatever. Monsieur Hotet nodded to the commissary, and the latter took up the tale. This morning, the old servant Francois, on descending to start her work, found the front door ajar. Feeling a momentary alarm as to burglars, she looked into the dining room, but seeing the silver was safe, she thought no more about it, concluding that her master had, without doubt, risen early and gone for a stroll. Pardon, monsieur, for interrupting, but was that a common practice of his? No, it was not. But old Francois had the common idea as regards the English, that they are mad and liable to do the most unaccountable things at any moment. Going to call her mistress as usual, a younger maid, I'm just going to call her Linny, was horrified to discover her gagged and bound, and almost at the same moment, news was brought that Mr. Renaud's body had been discovered, stone dead, stabbed in the back. Where? That is one of the most extraordinary features of the case, Monsieur Perrault. The body was lying, face downwards, in an open grave. What? Yes, the pit was freshly dug, just a few yards outside the boundary of the villa grounds. And he has been dead how long? Dr. Durand answered this. I examined the body this morning at 10 o'clock. Death must have taken place at least 7 and possibly 10 hours previously. That fixes it at between midnight and 3 in the morning. Exactly. And Madame Renoir's evidence places it at after 2 in the morning, which narrows the field still further. Death must have been instantaneous, and naturally could not have been self-inflicted. Perrault nodded, and the commissary was resumed. Madame Renoir was hastily freed from the cords that bound her by the horrified servants. She was in a terrible condition of weakness, almost unconscious from the pain of her bonds. It appears that 2 masked men entered the bedroom, gagged and bound her, whilst forcibly abducting her husband. This we know at second hand from the servants. On hearing the tragic news, she fell at once into an alarming state of agitation. Just a moment. Sorry about that. I had to clear my throat a bit. On arrival, Dr. Durand immediately prescribed a sedative, and we have not yet been able to question her. But without doubt, she will awake more calm and be equal to bearing the strain of the interrogation. The commissary paused. And the inmates of the house, monsieur? There's old Francois, the housekeeper. She lived for many years with the former owners of the Villa Genevieve. Then there are 2 young girls, sisters, Denise and Lenny Hollard. Their home is in Merlinville, and they come of the most respectable parents. Then there is the chauffeur whom Monsieur Renaud brought over from England with him, but he is away on a holiday. Finally, there are Madame Renoir and her son, Monsieur Jacques Renaud. He too is away from home at present. Perrault bowed his head. Monsieur Hotet spoke. Marchand. The sergeant de ville appeared. Bring in the woman, Francois. The man saluted and disappeared. In a moment or two, he returned, escorting the frightened Francois. Your name is Francois Arichet? Yes, monsieur. You've been a long time in service at the Villa Genevieve. 11 years with Madame la Vicomtesse. Then when she sold the villa this spring, I consented to remain on with the English milord. Never did I imagine. The magistrate cut her short. Without doubt, without doubt. Now, Francois, in this matter of the front door, whose business was it to fasten it at night? Mine, monsieur. Always I saw to it myself. And last night? I fastened it as usual. You are sure of that? I swear it by the blessed saints, monsieur. What time would that be? The same time as usual, 10:30, monsieur. What about the rest of the household? Had they gone up to bed? Madame had retired some time before. Denise and Lenny went up with me. Monsieur was still in his study. Then, if anyone unfastened the door afterward, it must have been Monsieur Renaud himself. Francois shrugged her broad shoulders. What should he do that for? With robbers and assassins passing every minute? A nice idea. Monsieur was not an imbecile. It is not as though he had to let cette dame out. The magistrate interrupted sharply. Cette dame? What lady do you mean? Why, the lady who had come to see him. Had a lady been to see him that evening? But yes, monsieur, and many other evenings as well. Who was she? Did you know her? A rather cunning look spread over the woman's face. How should I know who it was? She grumbled. I did not let her in last night. Aha! Roared the examining magistrate, bringing his hand down with a bang on the table. You would trifle with the police, would you? I demand that you tell me at once the name of this woman who came to visit Monsieur Renaud in the evenings. The police, grumbled Francois. Never did I think I should be mixed up with the police. but I know well enough who she was. It was Madame d'Abril. The commissary uttered an exclamation and leaned forward as though in utter astonishment. Madame d'Abril, from the Villa Marguerite, just down the road? That is what I said, monsieur. Oh, she is a pretty one, celle-là. The old woman tossed her head scornfully. Madame d'Abril, murmured the commissary. Impossible. Voila, grumbled Francois. That is all you get for telling the truth. Not at all, said the examining magistrate soothingly. We were surprised, that's all. Madame d'Abril, then, and Monsieur Renaud, they were... He paused delicately. Eh? It was that, without doubt? How should I know? But what will you? Monsieur, he was the milord anglais très riche, and Madame d'Abril, she was poor, that one, and très chic for all that she lived so quietly with her daughter. Not a doubt of it, she has had her history. But she is no longer young. But ma foi, if I speak to you who have seen the men's heads turn after her as she goes down the street. Besides, lately, she has had more money to spend. All the town knows it. The little economies, they are at an end. And Francois shook her head with an air of unalterable certainty. Monsieur Hotet stroked his beard reflectively. And Madame Renoir, he asked at length, how did she take this friendship? Francois shrugged her shoulders. She was always most amiable, most polite. One would say that she suspected nothing. But all the same, is it not so? The heart suffers, monsieur. Day by day I have watched Madame grow paler and thinner. She was not the same woman who arrived here a month ago. Monsieur, too, has changed. He also has had his worries. One could see that he was on the brink of a crisis of the nerves. And who could wonder with an affair conducted such a fashion? No reticence, no discretion. Style Anglaise, without a doubt. I bounded indignantly in my seat, but the examining magistrate was continuing his questions, undistracted by side issues. You say that Monsieur Renaud had not let Madame d'Abril out. Had she left, then? Yes, monsieur. I heard them come out of the study and go to the door. Monsieur said good night and shut the door after her. What time was that? About 25 minutes after 10, monsieur. Do you know when Monsieur Renaud went to bed? I heard him come up about 10 minutes after we did. The stair creaks so that one hears everyone who goes up and down. And that is all. You heard no sound of disturbance during the night? None whatever, monsieur. Which of the servants came down the first in the morning? I did, monsieur. At once I saw the door swinging open. What about the other downstairs windows? Were they all fastened? Every one of them. There was nothing suspicious or out of place anywhere. Good, Francois. You can go. The old woman shuffled toward the door. On the threshold she looked back. I will tell you one thing, monsieur. That Madame d'Abril, she is a bad one. Oh, yes, one woman knows about another. She is a bad one, remember that. And shaking her head sagely, Francois left the room. All right, let's take a short intermission there. If you need to get some more tea or warm up your cup, now's a good time to do it. We also have the magic 8-ball, if anybody wants to ask it any questions. Well, apparently it doesn't want to give me an answer. I think we'll meet Cinderella again. And I suppose the text all but confirmed it. Do you guys think Hastings will, That's what I was about to ask. I was looking away. What did the 8-ball say? Hey, I like the 8 ball. You should definitely, if you're enjoying the stream, click follow and like and share it. And if you want to support the stream and see more of it, there is a Patreon available, and the link is on the Twitch page. You can also see it on the screen right now. And yeah, so I appreciate any support you care to give, whether that's in terms of recommending the channel to a friend, or supporting on sub, or just participating in the community. See, the 8 ball likes you. But I said I'd speak a little bit about my grandmother, I think. So, when I was getting out of the military, my grandmother was in and out of the hospital because the cancer had metastasized and spread everywhere. It was lungs, lymph nodes, in the bones, in her brain, everywhere, and she's just wasting away. And it had after my grandfather passed, the cancer came back with a vengeance and just roared through her. They'd been together over 50 years, and the light went out when he passed. And I was trying to get home from the military as fast as I could. And of course, there's any of you who have been in the military know all about whatever country, it's all the same. It's bureaucracy and paperwork and hurry up and wait, and those things are universal for anyone serving in any military. And your time and your destiny is not your own. But I made it back in country, but not to where I could travel on straight home. I had to wait for some paperwork and whatnot to process, and I begged and begged them to let me run on ahead of the paperwork, even if it meant I had to extend my time in a little bit, or surrender pay, or anything. I was offering any bargain I could think of, but they wouldn't do it. But when I landed in country, finally, I called, and I was able to speak to her there in the hospital, and she was so quiet and so weak, but I got to tell her that I loved her, and that I missed her, and we got to say goodbye. And it's all right. It's been a while. Wouldn't think that would still affect me quite like this, but she passed the next day, and I got to say goodbye, but I didn't get to see her one last time. Anyway. Yeah, I'm gonna mute the mic for just a second, guys. All right. Yeah. Okay. All the feels. Sorry about that. My grandparents were pretty amazing people, and they basically raised me for a few years because my biological parents had their own stress and drama to deal with. So, anyway, what do you guys think of the second Perot novel so far? Are you enjoying it? Hastings definitely hasn't changed or grown or evolved as a character yet. He is clearly still a barrel of hormones and judgment and arrogance. I don't know. Maybe I'm too harsh on him, but I don't have a whole lot of respect for his character, if I'm being honest. Yeah, when I was younger, ironically at my grandparents', I caught bits and pieces of a couple of the movies because my grandparents would watch them, and they had copies of the novels. I need to find a setting to get that thing to stay up longer. What did it say? It's a good response, though, isn't it? I don't actually know if it was TV or movies. It was ages ago, and I was young, and quite frankly, at the time, I was like, why aren't there cartoons on? I want to watch cartoons. What's this weird stuff? Who's this little dude with the funny mustache? But, oh, sounds like the 8-ball's trying not to hurt your feelings. But, yeah, I actually had never read the books before I started reading them for the channel. And enjoyed Mysterious Affair Styles quite a lot more than I expected to. And so that's partly why I'm reading this one now. But this is only the second Agatha Christie novel I've ever actually read. And 8-ball's got sass today. Oh no, I'm out of tea. Ah, oh, sad day. Sad day. It also got cold. I have not ordered the... Oh my god, that's the perfect answer. That was perfect. Stop being salty. Nope. Got any grapes? Freaking duck. I have not gotten the tea warmer yet. If anybody has any recommendations, I am looking for a warmer. Couple of people donated specifically for me to go and buy a warmer, so I suppose I probably ought to go get one. All right. Well, shall we get back to the story? You should, if you find a good one, link it in the chat in the Discord. Before we go back, if you have not yet, take a second, click that purple follow button, click on the Discord link, join the Discord so you can connect with the other people in the bedtime community, chat with me. We do after stream gaming on Fridays and Saturdays with subscribers. Patreon, if you want to support the stream or get in on the gaming, there's other benefits. You get subscriber perks in the Discord as well. You even get control of the music box on the Discord. So I hand you the remote to my stereo and my sound system if you help support the stream as a thank you. But yeah, we've got a Minecraft server up, and we're starting up a 7 Days to Die server as well, strictly for the community. Well, the Dino Nuggies are not on the way. They're actually already here. They are in my freezer, ready to be nommed on Friday. So, but as I said, there's also a YouTube channel with all of my past content. So please check that out. The link is on the Twitch, and you can find the complete reading for the Mysterious Ferret Styles there, as well as the other books that we've read. And go ahead and throw a subscribe on there so you're updated when I load new content on there. And we'll also be live streaming to YouTube once I figure out the dropped frames issue and get that sorted out. But for now, let's return to the murder on the links. Love that new transition. That's awesome. Eventually we'll get a custom one. I don't know, maybe we can make it like an animated page turn, because I think that'd be cool, right? Like page of a book turning with text and stuff or something. I don't know. I'm glad it didn't scare you. Yep, the transition's one of the upgrades we were able to do with the support from everybody. I'm taking the bulk of anything that comes in through the Patreon and just plowing it into improvements on the stream, quality upgrades, that kind of thing. Not just buying like cool gear, but looking for the best, greatest impact on the quality for you guys for the money spent, and trying to be intelligent, maybe even parsimonious about it. But I'm trying to do everything that I can to make it the best experience for you guys that I can. And so I thank you guys for the support. We can talk about that on the Discord after the stream, Biscuit, and see if something like that would be a possibility. Well, I did spend some on the Dino Nuggies, and I will buy a tea warmer, but I figure those are basically toward the stream too, right? All right. So Francois had just left the room after castigating Madame Dobril. So Lenny Willard called the magistrate. Lenny appeared dissolved in tears and inclined to be hysterical. Monsieur Hotet dealt with her adroitly. Her evidence was mainly concerned with the discovery of her mistress, gagged and bound, of which she gave rather an exaggerated account. She, like Francois, had heard nothing during the night. Her sister Denise succeeded her. She agreed that her master had changed greatly of late. Every day he became more and more morose. He ate less, he was always depressed. But Denise had her own theory. Without doubt, it was the mafia he had on his track. 2 masked men. Who else could it be? A terrible society, that. It is, of course, possible, said the magistrate smoothly. Now, my girl, was it you who admitted Madame Dobril to the house last night? Not last night, monsieur. The night before. But Francois had just told us that Madame Dobril was here last night. No, monsieur. A lady did come to see Monsieur de Renal last night, but it was not Madame Dobril. Surprised, the magistrate insisted, but the girl held firm. She knew Madame Dobril perfectly by sight. This lady was dark also, but shorter and much younger. Nothing could shake her statement. Had you ever seen this lady before? Never, monsieur. And then the girl added diffidently, but I think she was English. English? Yes, monsieur. She asked for Monsieur Renaud in quite good French. But the accent, one can always tell it, n'est-ce pas? Besides, when they came out of the study, they were speaking in English. Did you hear what they said? Could you understand it, I mean? Me? I speak the English very well, said Denise with pride. The lady was speaking too fast for me to catch what she said, but I heard Monsieur's last words as he opened the door for her. She paused and then repeated carefully and laboriously, Yes, yes, but for God's sake, go now. Yes, yes, but for God's sake, go now, repeated the magistrate. He dismissed Denise, and after a moment or two for consideration, recalled Francois. To her he propounded the question as to whether she had not made a mistake in fixing the night of Madame de Brio's visit. Francois, however, proved unexpectedly obstinate. It was last night that Madame de Brio had come. Without a doubt it was she. Denise wished to make herself interesting. Voilà tout. So she had cooked up this fine tale about a strange lady, airing her knowledge of English, too. Probably Monsieur had never spoken that sentence in English at all, and even if he had, it proved nothing, for Madame de Brio spoke English perfectly, and generally used that language when talking to Monsieur and Madame Renaud. You see, Monsieur Jacques, the son of Monsieur was usually here, and he spoke the French very badly. The magistrate did not insist. Instead, he inquired about the chauffeur, and learned that only yesterday Monsieur Renaud had declared that he was not likely to use the car, and that Masters might just as well take a holiday. A perplexed frown was beginning to gather between Perrault's eyes. What is it? I whispered. He shook his head impatiently and asked a question. Pardon, Monsieur Bex, but without doubt Monsieur Renaud could drive the car himself? The commissary looked over at Francois, and the old woman replied promptly. No, Monsieur did not drive himself. Perrault's frown deepened. I wish you would tell me what is worrying you, I said impatiently. See you not? In his letter, Monsieur Renaud speaks of sending the car for me to Calais. Perhaps he meant a hired car, I suggested. Doubtless that is so, but why hire a car when you have one of your own? Why choose yesterday to send away the chauffeur on a holiday, suddenly at a moment's notice? Was it that, for some reason, he wanted him out of the way before we arrived? Chapter 4. The letter signed Bella. Francois had left the room. The magistrate was drumming thoughtfully on the table. Monsieur Bex, he said at length, here we have directly conflicting testimony. Which are we to believe, Francois or Denise? Denise, said the commissary decidedly. It was she who let the visitor in. Francois is old and obstinate, and has evidently taken a dislike to Madame de Brio. Besides, our own knowledge tends to show that Renaud was entangled with another woman. Tiens, cried Monsieur Hotet. We have forgotten to inform Monsieur Perrault of that. He searched amongst the papers on the table, and finally handed the one he was in search of to my friend. This letter, Monsieur Perrault, we found in the pocket of the dead man's overcoat. Perrault took it and unfolded it. It was somewhat worn and crumbled, and was written in English in a rather unformed hand. My dearest one, why have you not written for so long? You do love me still, don't you? Your letters lately have been so different, cold and strange, and now this long silence. It makes me afraid. If you were to stop loving me, but that's impossible. What a silly kid I am, always imagining things. But if you did stop loving me, I don't know what I should do. Kill myself, perhaps. I couldn't live without you. Sometimes I fancy another woman is coming between us. Let her look out, that's all, and you too. I'd as soon kill you as let her have you. I mean it. But there, I'm writing high-flown nonsense. You love me, And I love you. Yes, love you, love you, love you. Your own adoring Bella. There was no address or date. Poirot handed it back with a grave face. I've gotten letters like that. I had a stalker once, actually. Stalker ended up having to go to prison and then be exiled from the province because she would not stop. It was actually it was frightening. It was legitimately frightening. Yeah. There was no address or date. Poirot handed it back with a grave face. And the assumption is, Monsieur le Juge? The examining magistrate shrugged his shoulders. Obviously, Monsieur Renaud was entangled with this Englishwoman, Bella. He comes over here, meets Madame Dabril, and starts an intrigue with her. He cools off to the other, and she instantly suspects something. This letter contains a distinct threat, Monsieur Poirot. At first sight, the case seemed simplicity itself. Jealousy. The fact that Monsieur Renaud was stabbed in the back seemed to point distinctly to its being a woman's crime. Poirot nodded. The stab in the back, yes, but not the grave. That was laborious work, hard work. No woman dug that grave, monsieur. That was a man's doing. The grave does argue against crime of passion and speaks to intent. I agree with Poirot there, especially since it was an open grave. That's a statement and a symbol, not an attempt to hide the body. As I said, continued Monsieur Houtet, at first sight the case seemed simple, but the masked men and the letter you received from Monsieur Renoir complicate matters. Here we seem to have an entirely different set of circumstances, with no relationship between the two. As regards the letter written to yourself, do you think it is possible that it referred in any way to this Bella and her threats? Poirot shook his head. Hardly. A man like Monsieur Renoir, who has led an adventurous life in out-of-the-way places, would not be likely to ask for protection against a woman. The examining magistrate nodded his head emphatically. My view exactly. Then we must look for the explanation of the letter. And Santiago, finished the commissary. I shall cable without delay to the police in that city, requesting full details of the murdered man's life out there, his love affairs, his business transactions, his friendships, and any enmities he may have incurred. It will be strange if, after that, we do not hold a clue to his mysterious murder. The commissary looked round for approval. Excellent, said Poirot appreciatively. His wife, too, may be able to give us a pointer, added the magistrate. You found no other letters from this Bella amongst Monsieur Renaud's effects? Asked Poirot. No. Of course, one of our first proceedings was to search through his private papers in the study. We found nothing of interest, however. All seemed square and above board. The only thing at all out of the ordinary was his will. Here it is. Poirot ran through the documents. So, a legacy of £1,000 to Mr. Stonor. Who is he, by the way? Monsieur Renoir's secretary. He remained in England, but was over here once or twice for a weekend. And everything else left unconditionally to his beloved wife, Eloise. Simply drawn up, but perfectly legal. Witnessed by the two servants, Denise and Francois. Nothing so very unusual about that. He handed it back. Perhaps, began Bex, you did not notice. The date, twinkled Poirot. But yes, I noticed it. A fortnight ago. Possibly it marks his first intimation of danger. Many rich men die intestate, through never considering the likelihood of their demise. Words are hard. But it is dangerous to draw conclusions prematurely. It points, however, to his having a real liking and fondness for his wife, in spite of his amorous intrigues. Yes, said Monsieur Houtet doubtfully, but it is possibly a little unfair on his son, since it leaves him entirely dependent on his mother. If she were to marry again, and her second husband obtained an ascendancy over her, This boy might never touch a penny of his father's money. Barreau shrugged his shoulders. Man is a vain animal, Monsieur Renaud. Monsieur Renaud figured to himself, without doubt, that his widow would never marry again. As to the son, it may have been a wise precaution to leave the money in his mother's hands. The sons of rich men are proverbially wild. It may be as you say. Now, Monsieur Poirot, you would without doubt like to visit the scene of the crime. I am sorry that the body has been removed, but of course photographs have been taken from every conceivable angle and will be at your disposal as soon as they are available. I thank you, monsieur, for all your courtesy. The commissary rose. Come with me, messieurs. He opened the door and bowed ceremoniously to Poirot to precede him. Poirot, with equal politeness, drew back and bowed to the commissary. Monsieur. Monsieur. At last they got out into the hall. That room there, it is the study, hein? Asked Poirot suddenly, nodding toward the door opposite. Yes, you would like to see it. He threw the door open as he spoke, and we entered. The room, which Monsieur Renaud had chosen for his own particular use, was small, but furnished with great taste and comfort. A business-like writing desk, with many pigeonholes, stood in the window. 2 large, leather-covered armchairs faced the fireplace, and between them was a round table covered with the latest books and magazines. Bookshelves lined the two of the walls, and at the end of the room opposite the window there was a handsome oak sideboard with a tantalus on top. The curtains and portiere were of soft, dull green, and the carpet matched them in tone. Poirot stood a moment, talking in the room. Then he stepped forward, passed his hand lightly over the backs of the leather chairs, picked up a magazine from the table, and drew a finger gingerly over the surface of the oak sideboard. His face expressed complete approval. No dust? I asked, with a smile. He beamed on me, appreciative of my knowledge of his peculiarities. Not a particle, mon ami, and for once, perhaps, it is a pity. His sharp bird-like eyes darted here and there. Ah, he remarked suddenly, with an intonation of relief. The hearth-rug is crooked. And he bent down to straighten it. Suddenly, he uttered an exclamation and rose. In his hand, he held a small fragment of paper. In France, as in England, he remarked, the domestics omit to sweep under the mats. Bex took the fragment from him, and I came closer to examine it. You recognize it, eh, Hastings? I shook my head, puzzled, and yet that particular shade of pink paper was very familiar. The commissary's mental processes were quicker than mine. A fragment of a check, he exclaimed. The piece of paper was roughly about 2 inches square. On it was written in ink the word Duveen. Bien, said Bex. This check was payable to or drawn by one named Duveen. The former, I fancy, said Poirot, for if I am not mistaken, the handwriting is that of Monsieur Renaud. That was soon established by comparing it with a memorandum from the desk. Dear me, murmured the commissary, with a crestfallen air. I really cannot imagine how I came to overlook this. Poirot laughed. The moral of that is, always look under the mats. My friend Hastings here will tell you that anything in the least crooked is a torment to me. As soon as I saw that hearth-rug was out of the straight, I said to myself, Tiens, the leg of the chair caught it in being pushed back. Possibly there may be something beneath it which the good Francois overlooked. Francois? Or Denise, or Lenny, whoever did this room. Since there is no dust, the room must have been done this morning. I reconstruct the incident like this. Yesterday, possibly last night, Monsieur Renaud drew a check to the order of someone named Duveen. Afterwards it was torn up and scattered on the floor. This morning, but Monsieur Bex was already pulling impatiently at the bell. Francois answered it. Yes, there had been a lot of pieces of paper on the floor. What had she done with them? Put them in the kitchen stove, of course. What else? With a gesture of despair, Bex dismissed her. Then his face lightening, he ran to the desk. In a minute, he was hunting through the dead man's checkbook. Then he repeated his former gesture. The last counterfoil was blank. Courage, cried Perrault, clapping him on the back. Without doubt, Madame Renoir will be able to tell us all about this mysterious person named Duveen. The commissary's face cleared. That is true. Let us proceed. As we turned to leave the room, Perrault remarked casually, It was here that Monsieur Renaud received his guest last night, eh? It was. But how did you know? By this. I found it on the back of the leather chair. And he held up between his finger and thumb a long black hair. A woman's hair. Monsieur Bex took us out by the back of the house to where there was a small shed leaning against the house. He produced a key from his pocket and unlocked it. The body is here. We moved it from the scene of the crime just before you arrived, as the photographers had done with it. He opened the door, and we passed in. The murdered man lay on the ground with a sheet over him. Monsieur Bex dexterously whipped off the covering. Renoir was a man of medium height, slender and lithe in figure. He looked about 50 years of age, and his dark hair was plentifully streaked with gray. He was clean-shaven with a long, thin nose, and eyes set rather close together, and his skin was deeply bronzed, as that of a man who had spent most of his life beneath tropical skies. His lips were drawn back from his teeth, and an expression of absolute amazement and terror was stamped on the livid features. One can see by his face that he was stabbed in the back, remarked Perrault. Very gently he turned the dead man over. There, between the shoulder blades, staining the light fawn overcoat, was a round, dark patch. In the middle of it was a slit in the cloth. Perrault examined it narrowly. Have you any idea with what weapon the crime was committed? It was left in the wound. The commissary reached down a large glass jar. In it was a small object that looked to me more like a paper knife than anything else. It had a black handle and a narrow, shining blade. The whole thing was not more than 10 inches long. Perrault tested the discolored point gingerly with his fingertip. Ma foi, but it is sharp. A nice, easy little tool for murder. Unfortunately, we could find no trace of fingerprints on it, remarked Bex gratefully. The murderer must have worn gloves. Of course he did, said Perrault contemptuously. Even in Santiago they know enough for that. The veriest amateur of an English mise knows it, thanks to the publicity the battalion system had given in the press. All the same, it interests me very much that there were no fingerprints. It is so amazingly simple to leave the fingerprints of someone else. And then the police are happy. He shook his head. I very much fear our criminal is not a man of method. Either that, or he is pressed for time. But we shall see. He let the body fall back into its original position. He wore only underclothes under his overcoat, I see, he remarked. Yes, the examining magistrate thinks that is a rather curious point. At this minute there was a tap on the door, which Bex had closed after him. He strode forward and opened it. Francoise was there. She endeavored to peep in with ghoulish curiosity. Well, what is it? Demanded Bex impatiently. Madame, she sends a message that she is much recovered and is quite ready to receive the examining magistrate. Good, said Monsieur Bex briskly. Tell Monsieur Hotet and say that we will come at once. Perrault lingered a moment, looking back toward the body. I thought for a moment that he was going to apostrophize it, to declare aloud his determination never to rest till he had discovered the murderer. But when he spoke, it was tamely and awkwardly, and his comment was ludicrously inappropriate to the solemnity of the moment. He wore his overcoat very long, he said constrainedly. Think he's implying that it's somebody else's overcoat or something else. Chapter 5. Mrs. Renoir's story. We found Monsieur Hotet awaiting us in the hall, and we all proceeded upstairs together, Francois marching ahead to show us the way. Perrault went up in a zigzag fashion which puzzled me, until he whispered with a grimace. No wonder the servants heard Monsieur Renaud mounting the stairs. Not a board of them but creaks fit to wake the dead. At the head of the staircase, a small passage branched off. The servants' quarters, explained Bex. We continued along the corridor, and Francois tapped on the last door to the right of it. A faint voice bade us enter, and we passed into a large, sunny apartment, looking out toward the sea, which showed blue and sparkling about a quarter of a mile distant. On a couch, propped up with cushions and attended by Dr. Durand, lay a tall, striking-looking woman. She was middle-aged, and her once dark hair was now almost entirely silvered, but the intense vitality and strength of her personality would have made itself felt anywhere. You knew at once that you were in the presence of what the French call une maîtresse femme. She greeted us with a dignified inclination of the head. Pray be seated, messieurs. We took chairs, and the magistrate's clerk established himself at a round table. I hope, madame, began Monsieur Hotet, that it will not distress you unduly to relate to us what occurred last night. Not at all, monsieur. I know the value of time if these scoundrelly assassins are to be caught and punished. Very well, madame. It will fatigue you less, I think, if I ask you questions and you confine yourself to answering them. At what time did you go to bed last night? At 9:30, monsieur. I was tired. And your husband? About an hour later, I fancy. Did he seem disturbed, upset in any way? No, not more than usual. What happened then? We slept. I was awakened by a hand being pressed over my mouth. I tried to scream out, but the hand prevented me. There were 2 men in the room. They were both masked. Can you describe them at all, madame? One was very tall and had a long black beard. The other was short and stout. His beard was reddish. They both wore hats pulled down over their eyes. Said the magistrate thoughtfully. Too much beard, I fear. You mean they were false? Yes, madame, but continue your story. It was the short man who was holding me. He forced a gag into my mouth, and then bound me with rope, hand and foot. The other man was standing over my husband. He had caught up my little dagger paper knife from the dressing table, and was holding it with the point just over his heart. When the short man had finished with me, he joined the other, and they forced my husband to get up and accompany them into the dressing room next door. I was nearly fainting with terror. Nevertheless, I listened desperately. They were speaking in too low a tone for me to hear what they said, but I recognized the language, a bastard Spanish such as is spoken in some parts of South America. They seemed to be demanding something from my husband. Sorry. Had some water try to get on the wrong pipe. And presently they grew angry, and their voices rose a little. I think the tall man was speaking. You know what we want, he said. The secret. Where is it? I do not know what my husband answered, but the other replied fiercely. You lie. We know you have it. Where are your keys? Then I heard sounds of drawers being pulled out. There's a safe on the wall of my husband's dressing room, in which he always keeps a fairly large amount of ready money. Linny tells me this has been rifled and the money taken, but evidently what they were looking for was not there. For presently I heard the tall man, with an oath, command my husband to dress himself. Soon after that, I think some noise in the house must have disturbed them, for they hustled my husband out into my rooms only half-dressed. Pardon, interrupted Perrault. But is there then no other egress from the dressing room? No, monsieur. There is only the communicating door into my room. They hurried my husband through, the short man in front and the tall man behind him with the dagger still in his hand. Paul tried to break away to come to me. I saw his agonized eyes. He turned to his captors. I must speak to her, he said. Then coming to the side of the bed, It is all right, Eloise, he said. Do not be afraid. I shall return before morning. But although he tried to make his voice confident, I could see the terror in his eyes. Then they hustled him out of the door, the tall man saying, "One sound and you are a dead man, remember?" After that, continued Mrs. Renoir, I must have fainted. The next thing I recollect is Lenny rubbing my wrists and giving me brandy. "Madame Renoir," said the magistrate, "have you any idea what it was which the assassins were searching for?" "None whatsoever, monsieur." "Have you any knowledge that your husband feared something?" "Yes, I had seen the change in him." "How long ago was that?" Monsieur Renoir reflected. 10 days, perhaps. Not longer? Possibly. I only noticed it then. Did you question your husband at all as to the cause? Once. He put me off evasively. Nevertheless, I was convinced that he was suffering some terrible anxiety. However, since he evidently wished to conceal the fact from me, I tried to pretend that I had noticed nothing. Were you aware that he had called in the services of a detective? A detective? Exclaimed Mrs. Renoir, very much surprised. Yes, this gentleman, Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Poirot bowed. He arrived today in response to a summons from your husband. And taking the letter written by Monsieur Renoir from his pocket, he handed it to the lady. She read it with apparently genuine astonishment. I had no idea of this. Evidently, he was fully cognizant of the danger. Now, madame, I will beg of you to be frank with me. Is there any incident in your husband's past life in South America which might throw light on his murder? Mrs. Renoir reflected deeply, but at last shook her head. I can think of none. Certainly my husband had many enemies, people he had got the better of in some way or another, but I can think of no one distinctive case. I do not say there is no such incident, only that I am not aware of it. The examining magistrate stroked his beard disconsolately. And you can fix the time of this outrage? Yes, I distinctly remember hearing the clock on the mantelpiece strike 2. She nodded towards an 8-day traveling clock in a leather case which stood in the center of the chimney-piece. Poirot rose from his seat, scrutinized the clock carefully, and nodded satisfied. And here, too, exclaimed Monsieur Bex, is a wristwatch, knocked off the dressing-table by the assassins without doubt, and smashed to atoms. Little did they know it would testify against them. Gently, he picked away the fragments of broken glass. Suddenly his face changed to one of utter stupefaction. Mon Dieu, he ejaculated. What is it? The hands of the watch point to 7 o'clock. What? Cried the examining magistrate, astonished. But Poirot, deft as ever, took the broken trinket from the startled commissary and held it to his ears. Then he smiled. The glass is broken, yes, but the watch itself is still going. The explanation of the mystery was greeted with a relieved smile, but the magistrate bethought him of another point. But surely it is not 7 o'clock now. No, said Poirot gently. It is a few minutes after 5. Possibly the watch gains. Is that so, madame? Miss Renoir was frowning perplexedly. It does gain, she admitted, but I've never known it to gain quite so much as that. With a gesture of impatience, the magistrate left the matter of the watch and proceeded with his interrogatory. Madame, the front door was found ajar. It seems almost certain that the murderers entered that way, yet it has not been forced at all. Can you suggest any explanation? Possibly my husband went out for a stroll the last thing and forgot to latch it when he came in. Is that a likely thing to happen? Very. My husband was the most absent-minded of men. There was a slight frown on her brow as she spoke, as though this trait in the dead man's character had at times vexed her. There's one inference I think we might draw, remarked the commissary suddenly. Since the men insisted on Monsieur Renoir dressing himself, it looks as though the place they were taking him to, the place where the secret was concealed, lay some distance away. The magistrate nodded. Yes, far, and yet not too far, since he spoke of being back by morning. What times does the last train leave the station of Merlinville? Asked Poirot. 11:50 one way, and 12:17 the other. but it is more probable that they had a motor waiting. Of course, agreed Poirot, looking somewhat crestfallen. Indeed, that might be one way of tracing them, continued the magistrate, brightening. A motor containing 2 foreigners is quite likely to have been noticed. That is an excellent point, Monsieur Bex. He smiled to himself, and then becoming grave once more, he said to Mrs. Renoir, There is another question. Do you know anyone of the name Duveen? Duveen, Mrs. Renoir repeated thoughtfully. No, for the moment I cannot say I do. You've never heard your husband mention anyone of that name? Never. Do you know anyone whose Christian name is Bella? He watched Mrs. Renoir narrowly as he spoke, seeking to surprise any signs of anger or consciousness, but she merely shook her head in quite a natural manner. He continued his questions. Are you aware that your husband had a visitor last night? Now he saw the red mount slightly in her cheeks, but she replied composedly. No. Who was that? A lady. Indeed. But for the moment the magistrate was content to say no more. It seemed unlikely that Madame d'Abreuil had any connection with the crime, and he was anxious not to upset Mrs. Renoir more than necessary. He made a sign to the commissary, and the latter replied with a nod. Then rising, he went across the room, and returned with the glass jar we had seen in the outhouse in his hand. From this he took the dagger. Madame, he said gently, do you recognize this? She gave a little cry. Yes, that is my little dagger. Then she saw the stained point, and she drew back, her eyes widening with horror. Is that blood? Yes, madame. Your husband was killed with this weapon. He removed it hastily from sight. You were quite sure about its being the one that was on your dressing table last night. Oh, yes. It was a present from my son. He was in the Air Force during the war. He gave his age as older than it was. There was a touch of the proud mother in her voice. This was made from a streamlined aeroplane wire, and it was given to me by my son as a souvenir of the war. I see, madame. That brings us to another matter. Your son, where is he now? It is necessary that he should be telegraphed to without delay. Jack? He is on his way to Buenos Aires. What? Yes, my husband telegraphed him yesterday. He had sent him on business to Paris, but yesterday he discovered that it would be necessary for him to proceed without delay to South America. There was a boat leaving Cherbourg for Buenos Aires last night, and he wired him to catch it. Have you any knowledge of what the business in Buenos Aires was? No, monsieur. I know nothing of its nature, but Buenos Aires is not my son's final destination. He was going overland from there to Santiago. And in unison, the magistrate and the commissary exclaimed, Santiago! Again Santiago! It was at this moment, when we were all stunned by the mention of that word, that Poirot approached Mrs. Renoir. He had been standing by the window like a man lost in a dream, and I doubt if he had fully taken in what had passed. He paused by the lady's side with a bow. Pardon, madame, but may I examine your wrists? Though slightly surprised at the request, Mrs. Renoir held them out to him. Round each of them was a cruel red mark, where the cords had bitten into the flesh. As he examined them, I fancied that a momentary flicker of excitement I had seen in his eyes disappeared. They must have caused you great pain, he said, and once more he looked puzzled. But the magistrate was speaking excitedly. Young Monsieur Renaud must be communicated with at once by wireless. It is vital that we should know anything he can tell us about this trip to Santiago. He hesitated. I hoped he might have been near at hand, so that we could have saved you pain, madame. You mean, she said in a low voice, the identification of my husband's body? The magistrate bowed his head. I am a strong woman, monsieur. I can bear all that is required of me. I am ready now. Oh, tomorrow will be quite soon enough, I assure you. I prefer to get it over, she said in a low tone, a spasm of pain crossing her face. If you will be so good as to give me your arm, doctor. The doctor hastened forward. A cloak was thrown over Mrs. Renaud's shoulders, and a slow procession went down the stairs. Monsieur Bex hurried on ahead to open the door of the shed. In a minute or two, Mrs. Renoir appeared in the doorway. She was very pale but resolute. Behind her, Monsieur Hadet was clacking commiserations and apologies like an animated hen. She raised her hand to her face. "A moment, messieurs, while I steel myself." She took her hand away and looked down at the dead man. Then the marvelous self-control which had upheld her so far deserted her. "Paul!" she cried. "Husband! Oh, God!" And pitching forward, she fell unconscious to the ground. Instantly, Perrault was beside her. He raised the lid of her eye, felt her pulse. When he had satisfied himself that she had really fainted, he drew aside. He caught me by the arm. "I am an imbecile, my friend. If ever there was love and grief in a woman's voice, I heard it then. My little idea was all wrong. Eh bien, I must start again." All right. And that is the end of the chapter. And we've only got about 9 minutes left in the stream, so let's go ahead and stop there. Oh, for now. I hope you guys are enjoying the book so far. I like it. It's a little, I don't know, the prose seems a little more confident and relaxed than the beginning of The Mysterious Affair at Styles. But that may just be my impression because I'm more used to Agatha Christie's writing style after reading the first novel. There is no 8-ball on this one. Let me see if it's on the ending one. Here you go. Now you can ask the 8-ball. Try again. But I do appreciate all of you coming and joining us for the story time. The butler did do it. Okay. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you continue to join us. We'll be doing story time again on Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. We'll be reading probably some continuation of The Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. It's a great old weird fiction story. The VOD recording it is available on YouTube and on Twitch. And yeah, please do join the Discord. Follow the channel on Twitch. For the older content, go over to YouTube and drop a subscribe while you're there if you would. I really appreciate it. The more views and the more subscribes and whatnot we get, the higher our visibility and the more chances for more people to discover the content and come and enjoy and be part of the community here. Again, Discord link is on the screen right now in the Twitch, and if you look up a couple of lines, it's in the chat as well. There's also this new thing that I did. I put together a Google Calendar of all the scheduled streams, and you can actually click on the link and add it to your calendar, and links to the Twitch are right there in the events, invitations, and notifications. And I will update that whenever I add a new time slot or stream or change the book title, and that way you're always kept up to date with the stream, and you get notifications that aren't the emails, so they aren't occasionally delayed. Some of the people in our community have commented that the Twitch notifications that they get from turning on notifications show up 5 to 10 minutes after the stream starts, which is not as useful. So there's that. We do community gaming stuff for subscribers on Fridays and Saturdays after the stream. And we also do a bi-weekly watch party, which will be this coming Sunday. We have not yet picked the video for it. We use Prime Video for the watch parties, so we can watch anything available included with Prime. If you have any ideas, jump in the Discord and throw out some suggestions. I'll be picking that in the next day or two, and then I will post in the Discord and on the schedule what we're going to watch. But again, thank you so much for coming and listening and joining us for Storytime. I really appreciate it. I'll check and see if there's anybody we can raid right now, but I am grateful for you spending time with me. This has been a really great journey, and being able to hang out and read some good books and drink a mug of tea and relax with everybody has been really great, actually. See if I'm actually still logged in. I am not logged in. All right. Well, rather than making you guys wait on the two-factor and all that while I get logged in, I'll just go ahead and end the stream here. But again, thank you for joining. Please come and see us again on Friday. Have a good day. Good night, Bella. And for those of you who want to chat, I'll be in the Discord for a few minutes before I say goodnight and go off to bed. All right. Good night, everybody.